everybody, welcome to this week's update video. My name is Martin. I'm an Inkscape developer developing features and fixes for everyday Inkscape users. You've caught me today on a Sunday because yesterday I was a little bit depressed and I just couldn't get it in me to do a video, so apologize for the lateness, but there is actually some good work to report and I didn't want to leave everybody hanging for another 2 weeks, so let's get into it. First of all, a big shout out and a big thank you to all of my sponsors. I really wouldn't be able to work on Inkscape if it wasn't for your help, so thank you all so much. If you would like to join them, please consider going to my Patreon or LibrePay, and you can find links there to how to support my work. I also want to give a big shout out, because I don't do this very often, but I want to shout out to the Inkscape project itself, which is paying me to fix bugs for 1.3.1. You can donate to the Inkscape project from inkscape.org/support. And a big thank you for their faith in me to be able to deliver the fixes that are important to the project. Okay, so what I have for you this week is text to path. This is a feature that Inkscape has had for a while, and in 1.3 I decided to fix it by basically making it so that text actually turns into a path, which is very useful for a lot of workflows, but it actually broke a whole bunch of other workflows. This is one of those situations where it was doing something, and that something turned out to be quite useful, and then when those assumptions changed in order to fix problems for other people, you denied functionality to a different set of people. And so what I did was, I first of all, for the last few weeks we've been discussing how to fix this issue in the issue tracker with the users themselves. And it turned out that the best way to deal with it was actually to create a new functionality, which instead of turning a text directly into a path, turns a piece of text into its glyphs, i.e. the individual characters that are inside the text. The reason why this is important is because in the traditional text path, say for instance an I with a dot above it, if you tried to split that path out again into its individual letters, that I and that dot would become separated as well. This gets even worse for languages with lots of diacritics. So the idea is that we need a way in which to split out the glyphs, and we could have done it by creating a new path feature, but I figured that it might actually be more useful to create it as a text feature instead. So I've created a feature which is text to glyphs. And the way text to glyphs works is it basically takes whatever text you've selected, and it creates individual text blocks for every single letter. This means that it's still text. You can still change the font and other various metrics if you wanted to. There are other workflows that this might actually be useful in, but now you can just immediately go text to glyphs and then object to path, and then you will get the original functionality that people had in 1.2. With our apologies that we don't mean to remove functionality from everybody. We're trying to balance the needs of lots of different kinds of users that have different kinds of workflows, and our goal really is not for us to imagine what the best way Inkscape should be. It's to balance competing needs, and then using our design skills, design ways of achieving both. Some other issues that have been fixed: a crash opening our own PDF files. This was an upstream bug that was creating bad PDF files, and then we were not opening those bad PDF files right. That's actually two issues. One is to work with upstream to report the issue and make sure that it's fixed so that 1.3.1 stops producing broken PDF files, and then also making sure that when we open those PDF files that will exist now, we don't crash. I fixed a stroke to path bug, which is where you basically turn the thickness of a line into its own shape. This was for a private contract, so thank you for them for funding that piece of work. What it was doing is if you had a rectangle that had a sharp corner, it would always create an extra node right at the end. And yeah, that took more time to fix than you might expect, because the outlining logic is its own special area of Inkscape. And it turned out like it looks like it's the last node, but it's actually the first node, because the path gets reverse in a typical programmer fashion. Is like what you see is not quite what you actually get. So that's been fixed. I did a bunch of refactoring on actions and extensions. Mostly what this is trying to do is it's trying to remove the graphical user interface from being a required component when you run actions. This is especially important from the command line, but it's also important for things like extensions. We want extensions to be able to have the most amount of functionality without having to load a graphical user interface in order to run that piece of code. That refactoring process is going to take time, because there's a lot of things in Inkscape that assume that the window is there, mostly because traditionally the window is a great place to just store things. And so if you wanted, say for instance, the selection, the window is a great place to store the selection, because then if you have two windows, you can have two selections and they can be different. But that does basically kill any piece of functionality that uses the selection as a context. So that all needs to be worked out slowly over time, so we're not breaking functionality as we shuffle the cards around and try and unpick the window, the graphical user interface from those actions. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was the color management stuff. Now, not a lot of code has happened this week when it comes to color management, but I have done a lot of meetings and a lot of talking to both users, designers, people who do print, reading documentation on stuff to try and figure out. Also, I explored Critter and GIMP and a bunch of other things for like how they were doing it too. One really interesting thing that I found was if you picked a narrow gamut CMYK profile, almost all of the colors that you picked using that color profile were out of gamut in the actual document itself. And this is all to do with the way in which the RGB is generated from the picked color, which is just, it's so what happens is that when you need to convert from RGB to CMYK and CMYK to RGB, you have to choose an intent, a sort of an assumption about what happens to colors that are not inside that gamut. But it also affects colors that are inside that gamut as well. And so what was happening is that the default intent is perceptual, and perceptual basically expands the small gamut into like the full RGB scale. And it basically meant that like your specifically picked CMS colors in a specific CMYK profile were then nonsense when it comes to the actual visualization. And it's such a subtle bug that I'm not surprised at all that it has existed in Inkscape for its entire existence. But like just making sure that now I'm removing the perceptual intent from that transformation is now doing the right thing. And so like gamut warnings do not happen when you are selecting the color inside that actual profile that you're working in. Okay, but that was just an example of like investigating what we have and finding issues and working through actually what is it that users are trying to achieve, and can I work through this process myself to achieve the same thing, and do the tools do what you expect them to do? And in this case, no. But in Inkscape in the future, yes. Oh, that's a loud car. I'm going to let that one pass. And have some tea. Why does everybody drive? No, I've never driven a car. I took some lessons. That's a lie. I took some lessons. Okay, so back to the work. So what's going to happen in the future for the color management stuff is essentially working out what changes need to happen to Inkscape itself in order to make sure that it's very easy to create a new document, tell Inkscape what you intend to do with it, i.e. this is going to be a CMYK document. Tell it how conversions for color should work, how exports should work, but in the simplest way possible. So it's not what currently happens, which is a completely separate system for managing the way in which the display happens, i.e. the soft proofing, from the way the export happens, which is the color management stuff, or the color picking happens. All of those things I think need to be integrated together. I think this means that I'm going to move the device CMYK profile that's currently a preference. I'm going to move it to being one that is by default is going to say look at the document. So basically use whatever CMYK profile is inside the document. And my head is also fizzing when it comes to all of the other things, C-Lab stuff, specific inks, all of this other stuff. And I think I have a pretty good story when it comes to overprinting, which can be pretty important as well. That's all the work that I've been up to. Let's talk about some of the stuff that's been going on in Inkscape that I didn't do, but it's worth highlighting. Pete Igel, he fixed a crash when you import a PDF file with an empty page. Nice work, Pete. Javier added 2 new features to the spray functionality. He added a preview, so you can see what object is going to be randomized next, and also fixes to the overlap so that it's more consistent. And Daniel Bowles has been committing fix after fix after fix after refactoring after refactoring for all the GTK4 work. Awesome work, Daniel. Thanks a lot for helping with the Inkscape. And that's about it for this week. Thank you very much for joining me. Hopefully next week I will be able to get it done for you on the Saturday. Let me know what you think about the outside pod position. And thank you.